For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
We've been waiting for you.
Hi, this is John Jackson Miller, author of Star Wars Kenobi. You're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z and Corey Clubb. This is the podcast you were looking for.
We would like to welcome John Jackson Miller as our special guest. John is the author of the upcoming Kenobi, an eagerly anticipated novel that Star Wars fans are extremely excited to read. The book covers a previously unexplored story in the Star Wars universe that fans have been asking about for a very long time. John has agreed to join Corey and me for a cup of coffee, and we are very excited to have him.
Your insight serves you well.
Welcome, John.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, although it's a little late in the day for coffee for me.
It might keep you up a little bit at night.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, John, first off, thank you again for being on our show. How perfect that on our podcast, Coffee with Kenobi, we have the author of Kenobi. That's an excellent. The force is definitely strong with this podcast right now, I would say.
See, if I had written a book about coffee, I don't know if I could have gotten in here. But
That's right. That's right. So number one, could you go ahead and tell us about your background as a writer? Corey's a writer. I teach writing at the high school level in literature, so we're interested in knowing your background as a writer.
Well, I was trained as a journalist. I was the editor of my high school paper, my university newspaper. I took a sort of a side trip into Soviet studies for a while. That's where I got my master's degree. I've said this a lot of times, but I would have continued with that, but the Soviet Union collapsed on my dissertation, so I wasn't able to. I wasn't able to go any further. I'm really seriously. I just come back from Russian immersion camp, which is like the worst kind of summer camp experience you can imagine. Indiana University, they have a language immersion camp where for 8 weeks in the summer, all you do is or at least they did 20 years ago, they had this. All you would do is just go and take classes during the day and then come back and sit at the table and at the dorm and speak Russian or Uzbek or Czech or whatever language that you were speaking. The rule was you weren't supposed to speak English at all. I realized I was going to starve. So I started sneaking out to Steak and Shake.
Attaboy.
But yeah, as soon as I got back from this camp, I was getting ready to apply to go across and do my research for the dissertation, and the coup d'état happened in Russia, and the old government ended up falling. The Soviet Union dissolved, and everything that I was going to be studying vanished. And I just pretty much looked at the world and said, "Okay, it's time to actually go out and get a real job." So that's a digression there, but that tells you, I have been studying places far, far away for a long time.
That's fascinating. I had no idea that. How cool! And Corey and I like to say that one of the things we love about our show is that it's for all Star Wars fans. We like to think it's got an intellectual bent to it, and just hearing your background. And did I read somewhere that you have a passion for history as well?
Yeah, again that master's was in Soviet. Actually, it was in comparative politics, but it was there was a Russian history emphasis to it. And when I went into the work world. First I edited a line of trade magazines for the lumber industry of all things. And then that fortunately lasted less than a year before I ended up becoming the editor of the trade magazine for the comics industry, which brought me to Wisconsin, where I've been for the last 20 years now. I've looked for opportunities to use my interests in these other things in my stories. They always say, don't just know how to write. You need to have something to write about.
Yes.
So For example, after I had been at the trade magazine, Comics Retailer was the magazine, Comics Buyer's Guide I was managing later on.
Oh, wow.
Scry magazine, I was the editor of that for a few years in my role as sort of a hobby magazine editor. But then I started moonlighting writing comics themselves. And when I did write my first comics series, it was about Crimson Dynamo, the Russian Iron Man.
Sure.
Yeah. It took me a lot of years, but I finally put that stuff to work and put that to use. And I still do try to bring in some of these old concepts and ideas every so often. Certainly, Knight Errant was the obvious one where there were many different schools of how to be Sith at that time, and that really mirrored sort of what I was doing in comparative politics, studying the difference between communism in Russia and communism in North Korea and China and Vietnam and other places, Cuba, where it had been practiced. And as we saw in Knight Errant, none of these Sith fiefdoms that were out there were run the same way at all. The local conditions varied quite a bit.
That is excellent, and that's quite a big background you've got. I think it's great that you can hear all the great stories in the background, all these writers that writers have, and you never really hear that part of it. I think you just hear that they write the comic books, write Iron Man, all this other stuff, and they think, oh man, you got such a great background. You have a master's degree. That's awesome. I think that's, like you say, you put that to your use, and that's an excellent way to put it into the stories. And what a rich history to pull from. Yeah,
it really does help when you're sort of grasping for ideas.
So how did that get you started in the Star Wars saga?
Well, I as far as being a Star Wars fan, that went way, way back. The first grown-up comic book I ever got was Star Wars #1, first Marvel adaptation issue.
Classic.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
By Roy Thomas and Howard Chaykin. I, in fact, read the comic book adaptation of Star Wars before I got in to see the movie. It was very hard to get in when I was a kid. And
Yes.
In fact, readers who open the first few pages of Kenobi will see that the book is in fact dedicated to my sister, who made sure that I got in to see the movie.
I saw that. That was great.
Because we kept trying to get in, and she was surprised by that when she saw it, and she was tickled. But I was always interested in Star Wars. I followed the Marvel series. I had the action figures. I followed, when West End came out with its role-playing game after there had been sort of a drought of information about Star Wars for a while. I got all of that stuff. And then when Dark Horse got started, I was certainly reading that. I wrote a few Star Wars-related articles for Comics Buyer's Guide, and then later on I think it was in 1999 I edited a magazine, a collectibles magazine for Star Wars. Just trying to jump in on that whole prequel craze that was going on.
Sure.
And so I got to embrace Star Wars on that level. After I finished doing Iron Man, I had the opportunity to pitch for Star Wars Empire. And that was the one series that was set in between episodes 4 and 5 that Dark Horse was doing. And I sold a script there, and Randy Stradley, the editor, asked if I had any ideas for what would end up being the Knights of the Old Republic series that I did. And Knights of the Old Republic ended up leading to work on the video game. Not the video game, I'm sorry, the role-playing game. It led also to work on Star Wars hyperspace short stories that were on the fiction extras or bonuses that were on the Star Wars site. That led to getting to do the short stories for Lost Tribe of the Sith that we were releasing as electronic freebies to promote the Fate of the Jedi books. And then, we launched Knight Errant as both a comic series and a novel at the same time. And it's just gone on from there. And this last year, I've been focusing mostly on writing prose. certainly, Star Wars is a big part of my life.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned prose. I do want to ask you about how the actual book Kenobi came about. But before we get to that, I want to take a little bit of a sidestep and talk about your brand new book, Overdraft: The Orion Offensive.
Oh, yeah. That just came out in paperback, trade paperback. This is a fun story. Again, it's one of those things that draws upon, my interests. This is, I think as we call it, it's sort of, aliens and armored mercenaries take on Wall Street.
Nice.
It is a story that's set in the 22nd century. Earth has been embraced in sort of an interstellar, commercial community. There's a lot of trading going on, and naturally, we take to it very quickly here on Earth. And also, naturally, we have some guys that are apt to pull shenanigans. And that's the main character, Jamie, who, in trying to get rich quick, he accidentally bankrupts his expedition from the safety and security of a keyboard in the solar system. He's never been out into space. The mercenaries with the expedition decide they are not going to take this lying down. They're not just going to go quietly into unemployment. And so they come back to the solar system and they grab him and they more or less draft him back out to the most dangerous reaches of the galaxy to try to sell to the toughest customers. He becomes a traveling salesman for the corporation, basically, trying to sell to the most dangerous aliens that are out there. And it's a lot of fun. It is. It's your fish out of water kind of storyline, but we also have some interesting aliens and some fun action that goes on because we have all these these armored mercenaries who really the last thing they want to do is be protecting this really kind of a whiny guy. Sure. As he's out there, and in fact he usually ends up making situations even worse just by opening his mouth.
It sounds great. Actually, Corey's probably thinking the same thing I was, but it sounds like a future summer movie blockbuster to me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
well,
I think so.
Let's tell somebody in Hollywood that.
I agree. Spread the word, listeners. Listeners.
This is the first. I've certainly written my own things before, just never really for publication, and that was one of the inspirations behind it. Was I had gone 8 or 9 years doing exclusively licensed work, and I figured, I do have several projects that I want to get out there. This was one that I could start and get out there quickly.
Well, that's great, and you can tell just by talking to you, you're an educated man. You're taking your historical background knowledge and putting those kind of sociological perspectives. And when you mentioned the fish out of water thing, I'm noticing a lot of that in Kenobi without giving anything away for people who are going to rush out and get it. But how did the book Kenobi come about? What drew you to this particular story and this particular character?
Well, I had always been interested in Obi-Wan and his past, because certainly there was a lot of time that we didn't know about. And, with the Clone Wars, we got to see, some of that time and with the prequels, some of that time. But we really never got to see a whole lot of that period where he's in exile, 19 years. That's a long time. That's as much time as Andy Dufresne was stuck in Shawshank Prison.
Oh, nice.
Exactly. And so this is a long time to be stuck out in the middle of the desert, basically playing remote babysitter.
Yes.
And so that was interesting to me. And in 2006. My editor on the comics line at Dark Horse at the time, Jeremy Barlow, had asked me to propose some different ideas for possible original graphic novels. And one of them that I came up with was the notion of doing a Western, basically, with Obi-Wan, set in the very earliest days of his arrival on Tatooine, where he is the stranger that's come to town, the new guy, and that certainly plays into all sorts of Western tropes familiar Western style stories. One of the big ones that was a favorite of Jeremy's and mine was the movie Shane, which has the gunfighter that has retired and hopes to live quietly now and out of sight of everybody. And of course, it's sort of like Godfather.
I was just going to say
you try to get back out and you keep getting dragged back in. Well, this is obviously what Obi-Wan has got to deal with, because he knows he's got to keep his head down and stay out of trouble. But at the same time, he's a Jedi, and he is drawn to people who are in danger or in jeopardy. He's drawn to try to help them. And also, he is dealing with this colossal loss of the Jedi Order and of the Republic, and great feelings of guilt over what he might have done differently or what he believes he did do, which is kill his best friend. And he is naturally inclined to try to figure out ways to, if not redeem himself, keep from going crazy, and to try to be useful, and to try to do something. The problem is that's in opposition to what his real mission is, which is to stay out of trouble and to keep Luke safe. And so that was something that I developed into first one and then another draft that was intended to be a graphic novel. We decided not to go forward with it. We never even sent it to Lucasfilm because for one thing, I realized it was just too long of a story. It really needed to be. I realized that enough of it was internal that it needed to be told in prose as opposed to comics form. And also, my editor ended up switching from the Star Wars line to Indiana Jones. And gave me the chance to write the Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull adaptation instead. And so, that was fine by me. I put the story on the shelf, but I never forgot about it. And here last year, I proposed it again to Del Rey, and it seemed to fit in perfectly with what they were looking for. And I'm really glad that I got to come back to it. I think that certainly I'm. The story is not exactly the way that it was. There are some changes, but the skeleton, all the important points that I imagined in the beginning are still there. And I really do think that having this extra 5 or 6 years of training and building my own storytelling skills really were necessary to be able to tell the story the way that I did.
I'm glad that it turned out the way that it did. And I got to be honest, listeners know this, my students know this. I'm kind of a book snob, and there have been a lot of expanded universe stories I had a hard time getting into, and sometimes I just put them to the side. There was such a buzz, and there is such a strong buzz for Kenobi, and it was actually a book in the expanded universe that I truly could not put down. It took me probably 3 months to read Scoundrels. I liked it, but we just had a new baby boy. I was working on my thesis, so I was a busy guy. Now what I do is we wake up in the middle of the night to feed Mason and change his diaper, and I open up Kenobi, and I am just having the time of my life reading this thing.
Well, I'm glad it's helpful. If it is, it is. The interesting thing about it is the approach. It is told almost entirely, not exclusively, but almost entirely through the eyes of the other characters in the desert. It is again going back to some of those early westerns. We have a status quo that exists, and here comes the disruptive influence, this new element that's there, and of course nobody comes to Tatooine because they want to. No. So obviously there's got to be a mystery behind him, and he definitely inspires interest around him from the Tuscans, who wonder whether he's a wizard or what his presence implies. And then from the locals, some who just want to make sure that the status quo, the situation isn't disrupted by him. And then there are others who just find him interesting and mysterious and really want to know, what he's about. And so, while there's that Western influence, it also does sort of draw on stranger in a small town kind of stories. And of course, we know lots of these from
Clint Eastwood. And
well, yeah, but even you go onto television and shows like Northern Exposure and Balakis Angel and the movie Doc Hollywood, where it's that person from he's been at the center of the galaxy. He's been at important places, seeing important things. And now here he is out in this new place where he's got to learn the ropes. It is a dangerous place. There are challenges for him. But one of the challenges is to look like a local and to learn to live like a local. And that's not always easy for somebody who's really, as I said, been close to the center of attention.
How do you get in the head of Obi-Wan? Obviously out of his element and thrown into this brand new place. How do you get into someone's head like that?
Well, 20 years ago, I moved from Memphis to the middle of Wisconsin. I wrote this book entirely in the winter here, where it's very isolated. I live at the end of a mile-long dead-end road, on a wildlife lake. Basically, the nearest town is a little village up the road here. Population 365. This is not exactly Grand Central Station here. So, my best friend is the FedEx guy. These are the things that you have to learn to live with. And I think that, there are a lot of kinds of stories like this where the setting is just as much of a star of the story as any of the characters. And I really did try to study desert life and desert landforms, and there are real life models for a lot of the places that we use in this story. And so what I really was looking for is to present a world that you could kind of curl up in and say, this is immersive. This is what it is like to be somebody out living in the middle of this, because Ben is finding this out. Obi-Wan is finding this out at the same time the reader is, what it's going to be like to live in this place. And, I do know that, that is going to be an issue with some readers that are probably hoping for, when is he going to leave the planet, or why aren't there Sith hunters coming, bounty hunters or whatever, chasing him everywhere. That wasn't the kind of story that I wanted to tell. And certainly that is a story that we've kind of seen before as well anyway, with all the different Purge style stories.
Sure.
It makes a lot more sense that, Tatooine, for it to really be a good place to hide, it's got to be that far out of the way. So really the challenge then becomes to him, how do I live basically in this purgatory? How long am I going to be here? Because he just really doesn't know.
True. Interesting, the things you're tying into. You keep making references to moving to Wisconsin. By the way, side note, are you a Packer fan?
Well, I made a really big mistake when I moved up here because I wore my Dallas Cowboys sweatshirt.
Oh, you are the enemy then.
And I was told by this very gruff guy that ran the production department in the magazine company that I was not to wear that ever again.
I'm sure.
And so that was the end of that. I grant that I have not, bought all the merchandise and everything, but yeah, I mean, they're winning, so I might as well follow them.
True.
I'm having much more trouble with the Brewers this year. This is just not good.
Well, see, I'm a Bears Cubs guy, so that Milwaukee's, I love that park. But anyway, we better the listeners are going to say, come on, get back to Kenobi. You addressed the idea of some of your challenges, and the challenges that you addressed pretty well implied kind of I don't want to say the geography because it's all sand, but there are a lot of different cultures, and that's one of the things that I'm drawn to in this book, because a lot of expanded universe books, I feel like a lot of the characters seem like the exact same person. You can just cut and paste the names, and you wouldn't know the difference. That doesn't happen at Kenobi. So probably what I'm assuming is the biggest thing that's knocked against, especially the post Return of the Jedi expanded universe stuff, is making the characters sound like the characters that we know in the film. So when you're talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi, I hear James Arnold Taylor, I hear Ewan McGregor, I hear Sir Alec Guinness, and your character of Obi-Wan Kenobi. How did you get so close to that? And was that something that you were constantly aware of?
Well, I do a lot of dialogue reading out loud. So dialogue is my favorite part of writing. It coming from comics, dialogue is really my only expression on the page because there are artists there to draw the descriptive material. Nobody ever sees that mechanical stuff where I'm saying what things look like. So I'm left with the dialogue, and really there isn't much in the way of captions anymore in comics.
True.
And thought balloons are gone. So really you've got just the interplay between the characters, and the way that I write is one where we're always in the head of one of the characters in the book, wherever whatever part of the story we're in, and so it is the case that we're getting a lot of this information about what's happening in this world secondhand. But what I want to try to do is make it sound like you're there, make it sound like you're actually these are friends of yours, or that they're people that you run into, maybe not necessarily the Tuscans being friends of yours.
No.
But I mean that you can imagine being in this place. There's a location in Kenobi that is sort of the central meeting place for a lot of the characters.
It's Cheers, Tatooine style.
It really is, in a sense. Cheers, or Fitzgerald's is the bar in Ballycus Angel. The Brick is the bar in Northern Exposure. There's always that place where you have the whole world coming together, and there's all these people who are seeing Obi-Wan from the outside, and I wanted to put the reader in that place as well. But you have that sort of nod and a wink, because what's really going on, what he's really dealing with. When when a situation comes up that's going to be awkward for him, why he's awkward. It's sort of like reading a Superman comic book or any superhero comic book where the hero has an alter ego, a secret identity, and we the readers know the secret identity, but obviously the people around don't. And that was fun to deal with. And again, getting back to Obi-Wan and his voice in this, that was something where I worked to make sure that, okay, well, if we present him with a situation like this, is he going to respond to it by freaking out, or is he going to respond to it by being Mr. Cool? Well, Obi-Wan is usually Mr. Cool. And
yes.
that with the exception of a couple of episodes in this story where, I think I wanted him to be really back on his heels and not knowing how to react, face a lot of the indignities or unexpected moments with a real coolness and a real way that I think if you read it, you're going to say, okay, yeah, that's Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan.
Very much.
Well, I think, too, it's like your narrative style is excellent in this book. And it's, like you mentioned, there was a lot of different points of view, a lot of different characters are involved. There's a whole different setting as far as, like, the little town and city and all their way of life. Like I said, it's the whole way of life you've set up. And you've got a really nice perspective with the Tuscan Raiders. And how did you develop that for this book?
In the case of the Tuscans, I read, a lot of what was out there. I read everything that had touched on Ben Kenobi's life, Obi-Wan Kenobi's life in this period. I think of him as Ben so much because he was in the Ben guise for most of the book. He's really only Obi-Wan in his own mind because of the way the situation is. But I did study other things that had happened with the Tuscans. I think there have been. Maybe there's been a short story or two that was told from a Tuscan's point of view. Yeah. Never anything deeper than that. And what I really wanted to tackle was, why do these people live this way? What is in it for them? And it entailed developing, sort of a mythology I've studied a number of native cultures for this work and for other works, and I came up with a mythology for them that also sort of ties into the larger narrative of the story, but I think it tries to explain a little bit of why they live the way they do. I don't try to make them sympathetic. I think that's a trap that you can easily get into. There's that sort of cliche of the noble savage or whatever you want to call it that it gets used again and again, where this group of people who are alien to us, they may actually, in their own way, be just as noble as we are. We just don't understand them. Well, I think as we learn more about the Tuscans, we realize that, to understand them is not necessarily to like them. It is not necessarily to approve of, the way that they act or the way that they feel compelled to act. Mm-hmm. And it explains, I think, why Tatooine is in a constant state of war that will never, be resolved. Or at least it's not resolved in any of the time that we've seen these characters. The existence of the settlers is antithetical to the Tuscan worldview and vice versa. And so it's always going to be a dangerous place to live if you're out there.
And you mentioned that you don't want to make them sympathetic as a species, and the way they live their lives. And like you said, I don't want to give anything away, but it was excellent the way that from the younglings to the adults, that how they interact with each other. And I'm so close to give something away. I don't want to.
Yeah,
but it's so it's so good
about that. It's okay to pity them. It's okay to realize. It's okay to realize that this is a pathetic way to live, but at the same time, they feel compelled to do some very nasty things,
right?
And they have done so. And we've seen this happen in the movies and in episode 2. The repercussions of that are playing out throughout our story, and it's one of the storylines here. But again, I think it's an important one.
And I think that's the thing that we're talking about. The brilliance to me of what I'm reading in Star Wars Kenobi is how you're forcing readers, if they're catching this, and I'm sure that our listeners are catching this when they read the book, you have to look at different cultures and different species, if you will, different races from different points of view, and you have a way of it's hard to talk about this without giving anything away, but I think I really like what you did with characters. I'll just say that.
Well, everyone is the hero of his own story.
Very well said.
And to create a character who's designed to be the villain and make him villainous all the time. I have written characters that way. The villain in Lost Tribe of the Sith Spiral, which we just did, the graphic novel. The villain in that was designed to be a scenery chewing central casting villain,
and it was awesome, by the way.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a departure from what I usually do with these guys. But again, I felt since he was one of the really, really old school Dark Jedi, I wanted to make him as Saturday matinee crazy as possible. But I mean, that was another thing with Lost Tribe of the Sith. Everybody in Lost Tribe of the Sith is ostensibly evil, but they're all the protagonists of their own stories, and they all have a reason why they think that they're smarter or their way is better than anybody else. Whether that's true or not, we find out. But yeah, I mean, I think. I've always tried to have diverse casts with an even breakdown of genders and alien species. I've always tried to come at this as Star Wars is a universe peopled by all sorts of characters, and they're all going to bring their own cultures and their own approaches and their own personalities to whatever's going on in their stories.
And it's hard to do as a writer. One of the biggest things I have a hard time teaching my students is, okay, when you use different characters, you have to try different things. And they just want to jump to different slang, you know what I mean, to differentiate how different characters sound, how to make voice, and you really do encapsulate that very well. So, well done.
All right, thanks.
I think, I mean, we've talked a lot about Kenobi here, and I think with Episode 7 coming out and all this hype around the celebration was just announced for 2015, what can we look forward to coming from the Star Wars novels and you personally?
Well, Kenobi is obviously the next thing I've got out. I'm also in the Star Wars Insider. I think it's issue number 143.
It is.
There was a prequel story in there called Incognito, which is actually referred to in the events of Kenobi. So that's coming out there. Star Wars beyond that, the future is always in motion, as they say. I think that we will all find out more as time goes on, and then we'll have a whole lot to talk about. I certainly would hope to be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. I've really enjoyed the time that I've spent in the galaxy, and I want to continue to do more work with Star Wars and more licensed work, even as I start ramping up doing some of my own projects. I have been working a little bit in some other realms on the licensing side. Of course, I did the Mass Effect graphic novels. I did 3 of those a couple of years ago. For this year, I've just been having fun with some smaller projects. I actually have my first Conan story.
Cool.
Yeah, that's just a short story, but it's appearing in Robert E. Howard's Savage Sword number 6, which comes out from Dark Horse in, I think, November. That's the big magazine, the 80-page magazine they do. And that was fun. That was something I hadn't done anything like before. And then we also just announced that for Pocket Books, Simon and Schuster, I am doing my first Star Trek story.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah, and that's a novella. It's going to be released electronically to begin with, at least, and that is called Absent Enemies, and it is set in the Star Trek Titan line. Titan follows the adventures of Will Riker, who of course becomes the captain of the Titan at the end of the last of the Next Gen movies. This is just a lot of fun because Riker has always been one of my favorite characters, and sort of the sidekick character that is in this series is Tuvok from Star Trek Voyager. And
sure.
if you're familiar with that character, we get a whole lot of the sort of Kirk and Spock interplay going on there because obviously they're different characters. But we really do get that total distinction in approaches to a problem between these two characters, and it also it's a linear sequel to one of the episodes of Next Generation that I was a fan of, and so that was fun to get to do. So that's actually what I'm writing right now, and
cool.
we'll get a release date announced on that at some point here. Again, not leaving Star Wars, going to continue to do it. It is just kind of fun every so often to write a story where I can actually ask myself, okay, what is how can we get out of this situation? Oh yeah, we've got a transporter.
Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, well, I mean, I find myself, having to look stuff up about quantum mechanics. And I would never in a million years introduce even the word quantum mechanics into Star Wars because it's a fantasy, it's a space opera. We don't do that. We probably wouldn't even mention genetics if it hadn't been introduced by the whole clones thing. There are always moments when you're writing a story and you say, okay, this is no longer a Star Wars plot. This is a Star Trek plot, or this is a Stargate plot or something else. Farscape. This is not that kind of story anymore, or this plot element really doesn't fit. And it's all about tone.
Right. Indeed.
And so there we go.
Thank you. Well, your time is very precious, and we are so appreciative of you coming on the show with us. What we like to do with our guests is we like to ask 5 different questions about kind of the Star Wars universe, and these are one word or one sentence responses, just kind of quick fire. Then after that, we're going to have you let everyone know how they can hear more about you and find you on the web and all those good things. All right, Corey, you want to ask the first one?
Sure. John, what's your favorite Star Wars movie?
Probably The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, man, good choice.
So far, that movie's batting 1,000.
Yes.
Yeah, I figured.
Your favorite character?
I'm a Lando guy. As you might be able to tell from Griff and some of the scoundrels that I've written in the past.
Sure. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, favorite line of dialogue or film moment?
Well, right now I'm sort of in a Ben Kenobi mood, so you can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting. I think that's very central to what's going on in the story.
I was going to say that sounds like the thesis of the story.
I was going to say.
Well, he's got to figure out alternatives wherever he can. Although there is action in this book. There's quite a bit.
A lot. Oh, there's more than probably Kenobi would like.
Yeah.
Listeners, you are going to love this book. If you collect, what is your favorite collectible that you own?
Well, I have a lot of different collectibles. Way too many. Comic books. Let's not even go there. But
we can relate.
Yeah, I mean, I had to get an engineer to come out to look at the floor underneath the comics collection. It was just too hunking big.
Oh, wow.
Well, I was getting free comics for 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, not 20 years, but for a lot of it, yeah. And of course, I married a comic shop manager, so she brought all the DC comics to the relationship that I didn't have. That was the dowry. Among the Star Wars stuff, I just have to look at what's in the office here. I've got the big Kenner replica Y-wing because I knew the thing existed when I was a kid, but I just could not afford it or could not find it. We didn't have eBay. So I had the little die-cast metal Y-wing, but I never had the big one, and now I've got it.
That's very cool. Last question here: what particular message or themes about Star Wars resonate with you or speak to you?
Well, I think there's a lot there.
Yeah.
I would say though, I really like the notion that the little guy, the most powerful person or most powerless person, has that ability inside to reshape the galaxy. Obviously we get that from Luke, starting out as the person at the farthest point from the bright center of the galaxy. And by the end of the movie, he's the most important person around. But it also, I think, plays out in other parts of the milieu. I mean, look here, we've got the Ewoks, the simplest, littlest guys, playing a pivotal role in taking on the Empire. I think that as well is a theme in Kenobi, that even somebody who feels like they live a life cut off and isolated from all the big events can do something important.
Well, there's so many higher level concepts to take out of Kenobi, and we would love to have you on after the book's been out for a while to kind of analyze it from different perspectives once a lot of the listeners have read it. So if you're game for that, we would certainly love to have you back.
I'd be happy to. It is the book that I really always wanted to write.
Oh, well, that is awesome. That is awesome. Well, John Jackson Miller can be found at farawaypress.com. It's a very cool website. He's actually got a cool write-up on his experiences at San Diego Comic-Con. And John, how else can people get in touch with you?
My Twitter feed is JJMFaraway. People can also find me on both Goodreads and Facebook at John Jackson Miller, just that word after the name. The Overdraft book, folks can find by going to any of those places and just looking for a link, but also amzn.to/overdraft1, overdraft 1. I am going to be developing some more stuff on my website for that. I've got a timeline up there and some various other things.
It's a great website. People need to check it out. And on our website, coffeewithkenobi.com, we are going to have links to purchasing Overdraft on Amazon as well as to purchase Kenobi. John Jackson Miller, thank you so much for being on Coffee with Kenobi and have a cup of coffee with us.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, John. If you would like to respond to a question of our show, have a comment, or just want to say hello, send us the email at feedback@coffeewithkenobi.com. Or if you have a specific question or comment for either of us individually, email us at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com or CoreyC@coffeewithkenobi.com, or visit us at coffeewithkenobi.com and click on the comments section. If you enjoy our show, please write a review on iTunes. You can also like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, as well as keep up to date at our Twitter feed. Just follow at Coffee with Kenobi. You can also listen to our show on Stitcher.com. If you enjoyed the jazz music, download the album Eye to Eye by Steve Torok on iTunes.
Give the evacuation code signal. That's it for this edition for Book Chat. We'd like to thank John Jackson Miller for being our guest. And you can purchase Star Wars Kenobi Tuesday, August 27th, 2013. Thanks to everyone who contributed to this week's show and all of you out there who listen to the show. Don't forget to send us your comments and opinions on our next show topic, Star Wars, the Special Edition. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney or their respective trademarks and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
There's no one here. Move along.